Welcome to the SWIKE podcast, the only podcast that shares the stuff you didn't know you needed to know about jobs, careers, and life. The SWIKE podcast, the stuff I wish I knew earlier.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the SWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier podcast. We're here again with our guest host, Anu, and we thought we'd have a conversation on leadership, communication, and the effect on grades. So the discussion came up off the air when we were talking about your program and how important and relevant it is, and then some discussions on how parents will ask, well, how will this affect my kids' grades, right? And then seeing how things like learning leadership and communication, what is that in terms of getting from a B to an A, or improving it, or maybe even bringing it down, because now they have all these other extracurriculars that they're doing, right? So maybe we'll take a minute to talk a little bit about something like the grades obsession, right? Because there seems to be, at least in our circles, maybe it's part of the immigrant mindset, maybe it's an Asian thing, maybe it's just where we hang out, but there is a bit of obsession about grades, marks, getting something better than yourself, your cousins, or whatever. There's a bit of that competitiveness. So I wanted your thoughts in terms of that grades obsession, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about grades, why they're important, and kind of their meaning in kind of the larger social context. So yeah, what are your thoughts in terms of that grade obsession, and where did it come from, and your perspectives on it?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. It is ingrained into, I think it's ingrained into humans in regards to the grades and why that is so important. Grades actually came about in the 1800s. Yale actually was the first university to introduce grades, the grading system. And I think that was brought into perspective just to give some sort of feedback to students as to how they're progressing. Prior to that, it was all just verbal communication. Okay, you're doing well here, you're doing well there. But as universities needed to focus on applications and really understanding which students to take in and which students are not fit for their particular university, right. The grading system came about because of that. At least that was one of the reasons. The other reason is, of course, to continuously give feedback. Now, as we progressed, grades have had a positive impact and a negative impact on students. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're talking about the positive impact, a little bit of competition is always good, right? Hey, there's that. Let's try and aim for the best. And sometimes getting a good grade gives some sort of excitement. There is this, expectation, I want to do really well, and I want my teachers to know that. I want people to know that. So there's that whole branding perspective with grades. And then there is that mental health perspective, which is the con. Where students feel like they need to be strategic on the subjects that they take so that they get the A grade. So maybe instead of taking AP math, they take simple math and they get an A grade, and they can still apply to a good university, stuff like that. So they're being very strategic. So the focus is not about the learning, but it is more the focus about getting that good grade so that I can get into that good university. Now, when we're talking about grades, or the questions that I get asked from parents who join my program or who are interested in joining my program and ask me, hey, how is this going to impact my kids' grades? Are they going to get A grades? Are they going to get better grades? And I tell them this: if teaching a child leadership or teaching a child to be their own advocate improves their self-esteem. And when their self-esteem is improved, their confidence is improved, you will inevitably notice an improvement in other aspects of their life. And grades are one of those aspects. It's not the most integral, but it is definitely one of the aspects that it does improve. But that's not our only focus. We're focused on the whole human being and what they can offer to the world as a leader. So those are kind of my perspectives on grade from a historical standpoint and its impacts at the current moment.
Yeah, and I would echo a lot of that, where, as you mentioned, when you help someone with their confidence, that kind of trickles over and translates to a whole bunch of other areas. And communication also is one of those fundamental things where everyone needs to communicate in whatever job that they do, right? Whether you're on the deep technical expert or something, you still have to communicate your ideas. Or if you're the most outgoing kind of salesperson or whatever, you still have to communicate as well. Now, some require more or less communication, but all communication is important. And when someone's confidence is boosted, then that just elevates them. And when you have a confidence in like doing math, doing science, doing whatever, then that will probably translate to stronger grades. There might not be an exact causation, but it's definitely a correlation in there in terms of building those fundamental skills. I guess what I want to, if I can have a counterpoint, is that, well, okay, grades are there, and what's the point of improving grades at all, right? So that's probably a different conversation that your parents don't even factor into. But one of the discussion points that we were having kind of off air is like, well, what is a grade and what do they even represent, right? Because it's a point in time, and this one test, this one assignment or something, they got an 80, they got a 90, they got a 50, whatever it is, right? But does that mean they can't do it better tomorrow, or they can't do it, or they maybe just had an off day, they were sick or whatever, right? Or they weren't able to learn. So those are some of the things that came up in my head, is like, how important are these grades? And I know as part of our discussion too, we also talked about how the kids aren't taught to fail, really, in the sense that you mentioned about taking the simple math versus an AP math, right? Well, are they not challenging themselves? So is it better to get an A in simple math or get a a 70 in AP math? Right, even though a 70 in AP math might be at a higher level than the 100% in simple math, right? So, what are your thoughts or reactions to kind of that conversation?
Yeah, grades are definitely a point in time. It's interesting how we treat children as machines, right? Or the youth
Yeah,
as machines. Like you need to keep going, going, going. You're an A plus student. How did you get an A minus? How did you get a B?
sure.
Come on, we're humans. When we grow older, we're okay. It's okay to have off days for us. When we go to work, we could have that off day. We could be a rising star, and it's okay to have an off day because work understands that. But in school, or some parents just don't seem to understand that children are not machines, and they can have off days, and it's just an off day. Or sometimes the teacher that's teaching them is just not in alignment with their values, and it's okay for that, right? So your grades reflect that. Now, as far as I do share the same sentiment with you in regards to grades, because I remember when I was in high school and when I was trying to choose universities, I was very strategic as well in the courses that I took, right? Which does not leave a lot of room for failure. I took the courses that I was very confident that I will do really well in, versus maybe a different language. I was very interested in learning languages, but there was no way I was trying to get a B or a C grade. But now reflecting back, I would think, hey, that would have been a good learning opportunity if offered to me, right? And I don't think the school system is there just as yet. So what I tell students or the youth that I work with is, if there is an interest that you have, take that on the side and do it as an extracurricular activity where you won't be graded. Okay, don't get into too many competitions there. So if you want to learn another language like Mandarin or Cantonese or anything of that sort, just go learn it for the pleasure. Download an app and learn it on the side. And technology offers that to you. So don't let grades stop you, and don't make those if you want to play it safe. But on the flip side, I know there are type A personalities who would hate it if grades were completely removed out of the system. They'd be like, oh, what's the use of going to school now? Or like, it would also be very hard for universities to understand whom to recruit, what students to recruit, because that is all based on grades, right? Like as soon as you enter high school, your grades, your how you perform is all dependent. Your SAT scores, your TOEFL scores, whatever it is, those are all grades at the end of the day, and that's the simplest system that a university can use to derive whether you are a good candidate for the university. These are the really good universities, right? Outside of the extracurricular activities and outside of the recommendations, those are the primary merit points that they look at first before they go into all the other qualitative agreements.
Yeah, and a lot of interesting things to possibly unpack there, in the sense that, well, is someone who got like 100% in kind of that simple math, if we were taking that, versus 70% in AP math. Because one of those things is some students are taking courses in kind of like those after school prep programs or summer school or whatever, because they're easier than the day programs, right? And different schools teach differently, and some of them are harder or more easier to get a higher grade, right? And as much as the universities probably give some credence into like the specific area or whatever, I is an 80 and 80 in English, right? So whether it's AP or simple, like how much does that really factor into kind of the difficulty of the school, the geography, or the circumstances they were in? It's a point in time. So as much as it's the system that's in place, it's an imperfect system, and I don't know if there's a better way to necessarily do it, because like the challenge of kind of maintaining does this person actually know it now? Did they know as much in grade 9 versus grade 12 or whatever? And does it show that kind of subsequent increase? Is someone who sustained that same level over the course of time versus someone who grew into it, which is a better type of candidate, right? So those are all different perspectives and things, which again, I don't know the answer to, but it's a matter of is everyone just relegated to a number, right? And it's just like, if there's a 95, and what does that mean? Versus someone who's like the most improved, versus someone who's sustained, versus someone who they actually started at 98, now they're at 92, right? That's not necessarily a great story to have as well. So all those things kind of come to mind. And then the point about kind of those easy courses, where I know in university there's actually groups created for, these are like the bird courses to take that will improve your GPA, and there's specific whole like forums and places where people will specifically pick them just because I know I can pull up my average ongoing. But those are some of those interesting things, and I think that continues on for high school a little bit, just because, well, high school might be a little bit different because there's some core subjects that the universities have to evaluate, right? So you have your English, your math sciences, and depending on which sciences you go to, they're always a set number. So you can't really have bird courses to bring bring that up, right? It's always the set number. But I'm wondering in that case, so if really the premise of these high grades is to get you into that like elite university, the high level university, what is that doing for, I guess, the those people who get in? Maybe what is it doing for the people who don't get in, right? And what sort of conversations are you hearing in regards to kind of those areas?
So my understanding in regards to your question about the students who get in because of their grades versus those who don't, is that like,
Well,
what sort of conversations do we need to?
Yeah, it's a little bit on, and maybe I'm not asking the question correctly, but it's more the conversation around we're all pushing our kids to get high grades, right? There's limited spots in these top universities, right? So go. You have to be really smart and basically outcompete your cousin or this other person, the kid down the street, and all that sort of stuff to get in that. And then eventually they secure a spot, right? So how do those kids feel, because now they grabbed one of the coveted spots, and then now how does the other ones who didn't make it in, how do they feel as part of the process, and is it detrimental or whatever? So those are kind of the conversation points that I had in my head.
Well, it's funny you ask, because I just released an interview with Stephanie Sue recently, and she's a student who applied to all the Ivy League schools in USA. She's in the Bay Area, and she was talking about her experience being rejected, and the way it happens is these Ivy League schools sometimes choose the same day to tell what their decision is. So they might choose the same day. So in the same day, you could get multiple rejection letters. Sometimes you have to wait a little longer. Whatever it is, it impacts a student's mental health. 100% it does. She, it was a low. She had to deal with the low. She had to deal with, there's also that family expectation. She's the third kid, the last kid who has the ultimate opportunity at this point. Her brother, her sister didn't get into Ivy League. So it was her, this was the last straw, I guess, of the family, and she didn't get in, and it really impacted her, because she did try very, very hard to get in. So from that perspective, there are students who take it personally. They associate they identify their success in getting into Ivy League schools as their identity. This is my identity. I'm a Harvard grad or I'm a Stanford grad. Like their identity is so closely associated to it that it's in Stephanie Sue's case, she's lucky. Of course, she had to deal with mental health and try and sort things out. And, she went into Berkeley, no complaints there. But there are some students who decide that this is the end of it. Like, I'm not getting into Stanford or I'm not getting into Harvard, and there is no meaning to my life. There's conversations around that, right? So then there's a darker space that kids go to. And there are some, I would say, I hope, because the Ivies, they only have a set number of seats. There are a lot of people who get rejected, and all these students find another option. Not all, but many of these students find an alternative option, right? Yes, they feel dejected, but then they go to the next school, the secondary option, and they keep going on with life, so to say. And of course, the students who made it. So this is interesting because I've talked to some students who've made it, who got into these Ivy League schools or even the U of T and all that. And after the first year, and then especially the second year, they get drained out because they worked so hard to get in. And now they have to consistently keep delivering to keep their GPA up. There's almost that whole burnout that they have to deal with.
Right.
But if you're asking in regards to about the students' mental health, when they do get accepted, they're excited. They, finally, I identified with U of T, I identified with Harvard, I identified with Stanford, and I got in. So of course they're very happy about it, and it does open doors, right? When they get into universities like this, it does open. Just generally, I think they need to work lesser to get or have doors open compared to those who don't go into those universities as well. So I think I've gone past what you've asked. But in regards to mental health and grades, there is definitely an impact and getting into universities.
Yeah, and what I took for that was really getting in or not. It's like helping students to see the potential and going and striving for those, and really building that mental resiliency. That if things don't end up going the way you want it, whatever that ends up being, in or out and all that sort of stuff, how to deal with it. And for those that go in, well, you still have to deal with it in a different way, where to avoid the burnout and stuff like that. So how do you keep that mental resiliency in there? So well, hopefully that's another program that you're working on as well, because I think that would be a much needed, where because I think all too much, as you said, that the likelihood of someone getting into one of those universities is fairly low, right? So you're more likely not to get in than you are to get in. But does your life still continue afterwards? Hopefully yes, and hopefully even becomes better, or at least different, because you were able to do that.
Yeah, and it is a story of life, like mental resiliency. There's that the one-time success folks, those folks who just have that one-time success. They
Sure.
become a superstar, they become a actor, recognized actor, or recognized musician, or recognized CEO for 5 years, and then boom, they're gone. They're out of sight, out of mind. And that's exactly how it is, right? Like, you have to continuously, if you want to be prominently well known, if that is your value and if that is what you're focused on, to be famous, to be prominently well known in any field that you take on, you have to consistently keep throwing out work. And that requires a completely different sort of mental resiliency, to know that you're going to fail at points and you're just going to keep going up. And there's going to be, multiple ups and downs while you go through that phase of life. So getting into a university, that's your first success. And then keeping consistent is definitely something that needs to be taught to students, right? Just be resilient, just keep going. And just know that you are going, even though if you were chosen to get into one of these best universities, you're going to fail. There's going to be areas that you're going to fail, and just embrace it, learn from it, and keep moving on. It's hard. It is hard as heck. I know that. Everyone knows that. It is hard as heck, because your ego just gets hit, right? It's like, I'm supposed to be the superstar. But hey, we have to accept that we're humans, and we, just embrace failure to a particular point, right? To at least to learn from it, and then to keep moving on.
Yeah, and I think that that's a great point where, like, for those people who aspire and really have never failed in their life, right? So they get into the university they want, they graduate top of their class or whatever, and then they're in the working world. But then the working world behaves a little bit differently, where they accept failure more, and they kind of accept failure pretty much where they expect it, and if you're not failing, it's kind of like what you're not pushing yourself, you're not going far enough in your boundaries. So it's kind of that interesting switch or that learning curve that has to happen, right? Once you graduate top of your class, or whatever it is, I still need to go through and accelerate, but in a slightly different way. I wanted to have a bit of a conversation, well, slightly different on, okay, so you get into school, and what's kind of the value of the school, right? So we say you should strive and go to kind of a top school wherever you can. So for those that do get into a top school, like it opens doors, right? Because oftentimes you're rubbing elbows with kind of a more elite crowd, I think is what we talked about, and we have a I guess just more of a prominency in terms of where people end up. And I think that can open a lot of doors, as I think you mentioned as well. And then there's, if you're in a kind of a lower tier school or something else, then, well, the likelihood of someone at a higher level is going to be a little bit lower, right? Just that's kind of the generalities of it. So um, it sounds like it's worth it to strive to get to that higher level so that you have those opportunities. But I guess for me, my thoughts is that, well, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter where you go. It's really what you do with that opportunity too, right? So when you end up to a top tier school, if you just stay in the books and just learn there, well, that's probably not going to be as beneficial as if you did like student clubs and part-time jobs and internships and stuff like that, right? So it's also a matter of how you leverage the opportunity. So what are your thoughts in terms of like school versus like all the learning you get outside of the classroom and things like that?
Oh, that is a loaded question. And if I can add to the whole getting into a really good university, I heard in an interview by Oprah Winfrey, she says whenever someone tells her that this person is from Harvard and is coming for an interview, she actually shifts and she sits upright. So even someone like Oprah Winfrey shifts and is upright because she didn't go to Harvard, but still the fact that that person's coming from Harvard causes that change. And there are psychological different, changes and behaviors that you'll notice where people will give respect to someone who comes from universities like that. But in regards to the schooling, I think it's a schooling is now in so many different shapes and forms. There's homeschooling that has been prominent for many centuries or years, at least, decades. But now with COVID, it's become more prominent, right? And families are reconsidering, hey, I could either homeschool my kids or I never want to homeschool my children. I want to send them to school. And I think schooling is, to me, at least as a parent, I think schooling is just a form of structured education, but and it's all dependent on your teacher. It's all dependent on the principal. It's all dependent on the syllabus, on where you are. Whether you are in Ontario or Quebec or Canada or US, where you get your schooling. So there's a structure that you follow depending on the geographical region that you're in, and there are many factors that work to support a child's growth, right? Parents have to be advocates no matter what. As they don't need to be helicopter parents, but they need to be advocates, right? Like curiosity, what's going on in school and all that. In elementary, I would say grades, like, come on, like a kindergarten kid or grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, like when you come to grade 6 and 7, again, grades, I'm really not for, focusing on grades. I'm for focusing on what are you gaining out of this whole thing? What interests you? Does dance interest you? Does robotics interest you? What interests you? Everything can interest you. So what interests you? And are you kind of getting similar grades based on what you're interested in? All right. So that's the schooling perspective. But I truly believe in doing extracurricular activities, because school cannot provide you with everything. I haven't heard of a school that provides a student with everything that they're interested in. They sort of give you a foundation, but doing extracurricular activities. And now with with access to everything online, children can access YouTube, they can access information easily. Like they don't have to walk to the library like we had to do at one point, right? And that required another set of motivation. But they have so much offered to them in their fingertips. Even extracurricular activities, like I provide my program online, right? And there's a lot of programs that are running online. So outside education and leading through curiosity is really a phenomenal way of learning. But here's the thing. When you lead through curiosity and learn through curiosity, that requires a different set of mindset for a child. I mean, adults struggle with that kind of mindset. So imagine a child. So I'm definitely in the belief that go to school, lead that structure or whatever, enjoy that structure, but also have some outside interests and lead by curiosity. If you're curious about coding, whatever, learn it on your own or go through extracurricular activities and learn it from the outside, because you can't expect school to provide you with everything. Just like how work cannot provide you with everything, right? I know my grandfather had to stay in the same job forever. Like he took a job and he had to stay with that same job forever. My father had to do the same thing too. There was no option for them. Like this is our life. We sign up for a job and we stay. But that's not the case with me or with. I don't expect my kids to have that thing where we can change jobs. We can have other interests out of work, right? We can pursue other interests. We can pursue other side hustles, and that's how life is. And that's what we want to teach our kids as well.
Yeah, I think what came to mind is the Mark Twain quote of "Don't let school get in the way of education." Whereas the school provides that structure, right, and it'll teach you that whether you're in an Ivy League school or a regular school or whatever it is, that's going to provide you that structure. But at the same time, it's due to a lot of facts, like whether your professor was good, whether your professor was dealing with something on the family side at the same time. Because sometimes the professor's great, but there was just a moment where that semester wasn't as great as they normally were. Right, the geography, the people that you hang out with, and your classmates and all that. There's so many different factors. So it's really up to you as a student and possibly as a parent to advocate and kind of show a little bit about what other things are out there outside of just the classroom walls. So you mentioned extracurriculars as well, because not all the schools will say, okay, you will, I don't know, learn all of these different areas, because I guess there's just so much to manage, and because everyone is slightly different, they'll have different interests and stuff. It's so hard for a school to manage all those. So you'll need to kind of go out on your own to find those different opportunities that really interest you. And then you talked about leading with curiosity, which I think is fantastic, where you're really going to school for that learning, getting that experience, and finding out, okay, what do I like of this, and how can I get more of it, so that you can have that sustainable future where you're not just doing it because, well, you have that grade. It's like, you know what, I actually enjoy doing it too, and I can do it for the next 40 years or whatever how long that you start start working as well. Because as you alluded to as well, when you get out in the working world, it's no different, right? You shouldn't stop learning. You should continue to grow and get better. Just because you graduated kind of your post-secondary or grad school, whatever, doesn't mean you're done. Right? You should constantly be learning and evolving and growing. And so whether you end up in a top school or a middle tier school or whatever, you have different opportunities offered to you, and it's a matter of you like really focusing on that, leading with curiosity and taking the learning there. And because there's so much access to information nowadays, then what you normally could only get in an Ivy League education, some of the lesser known schools are also able to get, right? So there's going to be different things that you need in order to kind of allow yourself to be successful in the real world. I wanted to shift a little bit to talk about kind of the aspect of like teaching leadership, right? So that is one where, I mean, there's no course in school called leadership. Well, maybe in an MBA or something like that, but at least not in high school. So this is one thing that obviously you advocate for and teach as part of your program. So what does that do to kind of help the student? We talked about how it improves their confidence and stuff like that. And what are some of the things that folks can or students can get out of taking or adopting that leadership mindset?
Oh, massive, right? I mean, again, my story started, for me, my leadership experience started well after a few years of working in a company and realizing that I can't get the leadership role till I have leadership skills, which I wasn't aware of, right? Was like I mentioned previously, it's not competition, it's collaboration. It's be working as part of a team. It's not just individual contribution, right? It's not me, it's us. It's us together. We as a team have delivered this project. In team, there is strength. All these things are, again, we as human beings are expected to know this at a young age, but it's fascinating. I mean, you look at youth, and I work with so many youth, they're not aware of that, right? So let's be transparent to them and say, yes, grades are obviously based on individuals and you are individually marked. But when you work in a company, you are going to work in a team. You have to delegate. If you want to scale and work, if you want to scale your own company, you need to properly delegate to people so that you can focus on, whatever you want to work on and work with a team together. So there are multiple facets of leadership: how you listen to people, how you communicate with people, how you empathize, how to motivate people. Again, there are frameworks around it. Dale Carnegie is one of those people that I follow. There's Jim Rohn. There's multiple people that I started following at an older age, I would think. But we can break down their principles to younger kids. For example, how to even talk to a stranger, right? Why, like if forget a stranger, when a new student comes into your class, what's the first thing you do? I'm going to wait for him or her to come and talk to. Why don't you go up? That's leadership. That showcases leadership, right? Hey, you're forming a circle of trust, right? Someone to support, someone to work with, someone to create a lifetime bond with. You find areas of leadership in anything that you do, but sometimes we expect children to just know these things, and it's unfair to expect children, because if you look back, we didn't know that. We just thought, okay, we'll just stay with our clique. In fact, adults still stay with their own clique, right? They're just comfortable doing that. So it's important to share these frameworks and share the benefits, right? And some of the examples I can give is, you want to be an influencer? Well, influencers build partnerships. If you want to be a social media influencer for any particular reason, for anything that you do, they build partnerships. How do they build partnerships? They collaborate with other people. They work with other people. There's a give and take relationship. Again, sharing frameworks on how you can do that. Sometimes I hear students saying, well, I'm working on a project and I have to do everything. How many times have you heard adults say the same thing, right? And all of a sudden, the problem is someone else's problem, not my problem. Well, have you reflected on the fact that maybe you love to do all the work and that you don't trust people and that you're not good at delegation? I mean, I don't say it that way, of course, but these are things that you can learn to do. Okay, what is it? Why is it? Is this a one-time thing that in one project you find that the other teammates are not motivated to work with you, or are you finding that any project that you're on, you're the one doing it? And usually in cases, especially type A personality kids or youth, will say, I'm doing all the work. And I'm thinking, well, that's not a good idea, right? You still need to trust. You still need to break it down into smaller chunks of work to trust someone. And then give them, don't start off with constructive criticism. Show them gratitude that they finished that work, right? And then if they are open to constructive criticism or feedback, then provide that to them. But you can build a bond that way. When you teach students that, there's a sort of aha moment, there's a sort of awareness that leadership and soft skills can give to them. And that makes them a stronger, more confident leader. And they realize the benefits of all of this working together. So those are the things that I incorporate in my program. Per se, it starts off with how to communicate effectively so that whatever you say makes sense. It could inspire people to make change. And then we work on storytelling. We work on then how to use storytelling for negotiation, how to use storytelling to influence people, how to use storytelling to do really well in an interview, how to use storytelling to have a conversation, things like that. So that's kind of what I've incorporated in my leadership program, and seems to be doing quite well because of that.
Sure, and that's one thing that I hope more students, more adults even get a chance to experience, because it's something that's missing from the current schooling system, and to nobody's fault, because the system is how it is. But things like a group project and stuff like that, well, you don't really get that same kind of dynamics and interactions. And I think that's why a lot of folks really take a look at things like extracurricular activities. So if you are the president or a director or something of a club where you have to organize, you inherently have to develop those skills in order for anything to be successful. Now, some people learn it the hard way, where they kind of make mistakes or things don't go according to plan. So to have kind of that structured approach in terms of learning how to negotiate, and delegation, I think is a huge one, where oftentimes, well, it just means you don't trust other people, right? And you can't communicate well enough to other people. So the fundamentals of that, I think, are so important to learn. And yeah, I look forward to having more folks have exposure to these sorts of things, so they can incorporate them into their real life. And hopefully you'll be able to have some of those skills for older adults, because just because they went to university or they've already started working for 5-10 years doesn't mean they have those skills either, right? So but I guess there are other avenues where they could potentially get that as well.
I think with adults, there is a need for awareness, right? To bring a program like this, they need to feel aware that they're stuck at certain places. And that's when adults are motivated to do something about it. Like if I was to tell an adult, there are so many principles in the way you listen, the type of listener that you are, they're not interested in that. As long as I'm able to listen, hear something, and get the stuff done. But if they're actually stuck, and if they feel like they're not understanding someone, and if they are aware that can help them, that program can help them become better listeners, so that they can be much more powerful as an exec or as a leader, then adults really will benefit from programs like that. With youth, I guess it's a little different, where we can showcase how it impacts them right now and then. Like if they're working on projects right now and they are having issues with it, it's almost like an aha moment that we can build very quickly with youth, I find, right? Any sort of, like, I want to be the captain of my soccer club. Okay, you want to be the captain of your soccer club. What's your struggles right now, right? Oh, people are not listening to me. Okay, let's talk through this, right? Like, how does listening work? How, and then they're more, they're definitely more open to it, because it's in the now, and they really want to figure things out to help them become a captain, or help them become, do really well in a project. So that's a difference between adult and, I guess, pedagogy.
Sounds good. So as we start to bring the conversation to close, so we've kind of outlined that, well, definitely leadership and communication are important, right? Those are kind of those key skills that, well, keep on going for us throughout our lives. But we have to be aware of, well, this grades obsession that we have. Although it's founded in the sense that when you get into a better school, you tend to have more opportunities and all that sort of stuff. But do that without the kind of burden of success or the grade for the grade's sake, right? We want to make sure that there's learning in there, there's resiliency that's built in there, so that if you do, and when you do, not if you do fail, that you'll be able to pick yourself back up. So if you don't end up in the school of your choosing, or don't end up in the job that you want, whatever, there's still the ability to kind of learn and grow from there. And from the discussion of the adult side, where you want a little bit of awareness for yourself, so that you can say, you know what, yeah, I probably could communicate that better. I probably could learn that a little bit better, and seek out all the different resources out there, because there's lots of programs for adults that are there. It might cost you some money, but chances are that the company that you're working for has lots of resources that you can access as well. So I think that's a lot of good conversation that we've had in terms of leadership, communication, and grades in schooling and all that. Are there any kind of parting words of wisdom that you'd want to share, Anu, in regards to any of the things that we just talked about?
No, man, I just think, hey, you got this one life, right? Enjoy it. Putting the pressure on a human being to earn a set amount of salary, I mean, of course, be able to support yourself. At the end of the day, you want to be independent, or hopefully that's the hopes that I mean, especially if you're vying for those really good universities, you're probably looking to become an independent consultant or lawyer or doctor or engineer, whatever it is. That's probably why you're vying to get into a great university. But enjoy your life while you progress, because childhood is so limited. You only have your first 18 years. And not to say that when you become an adult, you have to be lifeless, or you don't have to enjoy yourself. But childhood, it's a precious time of your life. So, and you'll never get that back. So enjoy it with, and for the parents out there, let your kids enjoy it as well, so that they look back and they're like, hey, we're not traumatized by our childhood, right? Our childhood is, the childhood stories are much more than I had to get an A grade in math, right? Versus, I had these great conversations with my parents. I had these great teams that I worked with in school. I enjoyed going to school. I especially enjoyed this particular grade and this particular teacher. Those are the conversations we want to have when we're adults, looking back at life. So if anything, that would be my parting advice. Just enjoy your childhood and try and enjoy adulthood too, and not put undue pressure on yourself. Embrace failures. It's going to hurt. It's going to sting like hell, and give yourself that time to, moan and groan, and then, just get up, dust yourself off and say, okay, I might as well keep going, because there's no other option here. I'll just keep going and I'll keep trying. And someone somewhere will always notice you. Someone will notice you. If not one person, many people will notice you. And it's that resiliency. And that is, I truly believe that resiliency is the reason why someone would want to partner with you, because they know that no matter what, and even you hear that in Dragon's Den and Shark's Tank and all these investor shows, people don't invest in the business, they invest in that person, because they know that they're resilient and they'll keep going. They had so many setbacks, but they still kept going. And that is worth the investment. So, keep going.
Sounds good. So thanks, Anu, so much for joining us for this conversation. And hopefully we'll have you back for another episode.
I love this. Thank you, Luki. I always enjoy talking to you.
Thanks for joining us on the SIWIKE, Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you found this podcast. And if you can give us a review, that would be very appreciated. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn at Luki Danu, LUKIDANU, and the same on most social media platforms. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Bye.